One can justify the police being very cautious on all of these and associated cases. They would have had a great deal of legal advice. There were no doubt been in a lot of contact with the Crown Prosecution Service as well, to make sure that they don't make any mistakes in these investigations, because they're so important. They'll be subject to such scrutiny that anything they do that could prejudice the case would cause a problem further down the line. And if it does, then they would be subject to perhaps justifiable criticism. So I have every sympathy with the police of being extremely cautious in every aspect of all these and related cases.
Peter Mandelson says he was arrested because of a, quote, complete fiction that he was preparing to flee the country for the British Virgin Islands. The Times this morning reports the Metropolitan Police had planned to interview Mandelson under caution in a fortnight, but changed plans after Scotland Yard was told he was preparing to leave the UK. Andy Trotter is a former Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the Met and former Chief Constable of the British Transport Police. He joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Andy, would it be standard practice for police to agree a planned interview with a suspect?
Yes, in many circumstances, one will make an arrangement with a suspect if there's no need for an immediate arrest. And it's quite common for police to arrange a date for someone to come in, usually with their solicitor, for interview.
So what would change that plan then?
Well, it would change that plan if the police have got reasonable grounds to suspect that someone has committed an offence, and then they've got to justify that arrest by a series of potential issues, one of which is usually to allow a prompt and effective investigation of the offence, or, amongst other things, to prevent the disappearance of the person in question. And so if you can justify that, there's got to be reasonable grounds for the arrest. Reasonable grounds then have to be presented to the custody officer on arrival at the police station. And of course, the suspect must be told what those reasonable grounds are. That will be recorded in the officer's notes and on their body cam, if appropriate, if applicable, and also on the custody record itself.
So what do you make then of Peter Mandelson coming out publicly, messaging friends, which, you know, we all know would have been done in a way that would have ended up in the press eventually, to make the point, and he uses, I think, the word, you know, that questions essentially the motivations behind doing this, that there was somebody suggesting he was going to leave the country?
Well, it's hard for us to tell from here, but something's clearly happened. But those grounds for the arrest have got to be reasonable, they've got to be objective, and then they could always be wrong as well. But as long as the officer can justify why they're carrying out the arrest, then that arrest can obviously take place. If a suspect is dissatisfied with that, they can, of course, make a complaint against the police, or they can or they could take a civil action for unlawful detention.
And if they were to do that, if Peter Mandelson were to do that, I mean, what form would that process take?
Well, I mean, anyone can make a complaint against the police if there's some grounds to do so. And also one can say sue the police, and there's plenty of solicitors out there who sue the police quite regularly on things like unlawful arrest. But in my opinion, this will have no impact upon the ongoing investigation into a suspect's case.
Can we talk a little bit about some of the documents involved in the Mandelson case? Because two of them, key documents held by the government on Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador, will not be made public until after the police investigation and any criminal trial has concluded. They're being withheld because there are worries that they could prejudice a potential criminal trial. What do you make of that? Is that overcautious by the police?
I think one can justify the police being very cautious on all of these and associated cases. They would have had a great deal of legal advice. There were no doubt been in a lot of contact with the Crown Prosecution Service as well, to make sure that they don't make any mistakes in these investigations, because they're so important. They'll be subject to such scrutiny that anything they do that could prejudice the case would cause a problem further down the line. And if it does, then they would be subject to perhaps justifiable criticism. So I have every sympathy with the police of being extremely cautious in every aspect of all these and related cases.
Do they have the power, though, and the sort of the grounds, I suppose, to prevent the publication? I mean, there's a real back and forth in Parliament now about whether the police are right to request this of government, whether they can force the government to keep these documents held back. I mean, it is obviously, as you say, it's a very cautious approach, but there is this argument about transparency and the question of really what would these documents be prejudicing if everybody were to see them at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I'm not sure the police have got the powers to say don't do it. I think it's perhaps a matter of a request so to do. But clearly, no one wants to prejudice a later trial. And there's lots of discussions about whether, let's say, a trial took place in a year, 2 years' time, would publication now prejudice that? And you can debate that. But I still think the police are right to be cautious. Clearly, the public has a right to know. Everyone wants to be transparent on all these issues, but if from a police perspective, if I was in charge of this case, I would want to be very, very cautious indeed about doing anything that could cause some resulting problems with any trial procedure.
And so would that stand in the case of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor too? Because the Commons yesterday, of course, called for all documents relating to his appointment to be released.
Yeah, again, there's going to be a timing around this. And the trouble is, of course, the police investigation is going to take a long time. We know how far, even when you've got all the evidence available, when court dates are set miles into the future. And I think there's an appetite at the moment for politicians and, more importantly, the public to know what's been going on. So whether or not there'll be any sort of other inquiry into this. But as I say, from looking at, I won't say narrowly, but looking at from the police perspective, I can fully understand their reticence around everything getting into the public domain at this juncture. But who knows? There might be some further developments in
Oh, Andy, I think we've lost your line slightly there, but I think we got that point. Can I just ask you before you go, if your line holds up, do you think more broadly that the rules around contempt are weakening, that people are struggling with them in a way that maybe we haven't before? And part of that is about the politics, as you've mentioned, and about the request for transparency, but maybe part of it is just, the news cycle, social media, the way that people react to things now. Do you think it's time to look again at the rules around contempt of court?
I do. There have been a few cases in court on contempt, and if a trial is miles into the future, the risk of publishing something now is less and less. But let's put a contrast with, say, jurisdictions like in the States, when you get all the information almost on day one from the authorities, which sometimes makes me flinch. But on the other hand, I do wonder sometimes if we're too cautious, and sometimes do we underestimate the ability of juries to take, from their mind things they've heard before and just focus on the evidence they hear in the courts during the trial. So I do think it's worth a look at, but we'll see if there's any appetite so to do.
Andy, thanks very much. Great to have you with us.
You're welcome.
That's Andy Trotter, a former Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the Met Police.